All right, everyone. This is Seibo Shen with another awesome episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. Today, I have a very special guest, and usually I just do my own intro, but today, I felt like I wanted to write out an intro for my guest today. So, Christina, you're going to have to listen to me introduce you. Maybe you may feel a little bit embarrassed, but there was so much about you that I saw that I wanted to make sure that I fitted this into the intro. So, today,
Nice.
I have Christina Betancourt Johnson. She is the CEO and founder of Standard Wellness Maryland. She's the first African American and Latina, or it is the first African American and Latina majority owned, vertically integrated cannabis company in the United States, and the first social equity licensee to launch in Maryland. She's a pioneering force in the cannabis industry. Standard Wellness is dedicated to empowering individuals to live their best lives through the power of nature. Christina is also a servant leader, a conscious capitalist, envisioning a world where cannabis is not only respected, but embraced as a safe, natural path to healthier living. With more than 15 years of executive leadership experience, Christina holds leadership roles in the U.S. Cannabis Council and the National Hispanic Cannabis Council's Board of Directors. In Maryland, she serves as the vice chair of the Maryland Wholesale Cannabis Trade Association and was recently appointed by Governor Wes Moore to the advisory board on medical and adult use cannabis. Before entering the cannabis industry, Christina raised more than $60 million annually for national and international nonprofits as the director of marketing for the combined federal campaign. She also served as the executive director for Conscious Capitalism and led both a national affordable housing organization and a regional mixed use and multifamily real estate development firm. As an African American and Latina woman, Christina embraces every aspect of diversity, fostering a culture-rich environment that is as engaging and spirited as the community from which she comes from. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you for having me. That was quite a mouthful. I'm so sorry that you had to say all of that, but it's all true. And I'm also a mom, as we just discussed before we, started the podcast. I'm a mom, and that is a big part of my life and being certainly am committed to family.
Yeah. And I believe we're coming into the age of Aquarius, and I am so happy to be able to advocate and amplify the message behind what you're trying to do here. And perhaps a great way we could start off is I talked about a lot about what you had done, but I'd love to hear about the segue from raising capital for the nonprofits and how you got into the cannabis industry. Would you mind sharing that origin story with us?
Yeah, of course. It's a long one, but I'll try to truncate it a bit for your listeners. The long and short of it is that sometimes the universe just brings you to where you need to be at any given point in time, regardless of the path that you were previously on. And around 2016 or so, I had meningitis, and it was a life-threatening form of meningitis. And so um, the reality was I was leading up a national affordable housing nonprofit at the time. We were rebuilding homes for people and trying to keep them in a safe environment where they could age in place. So a lot of our clients were elderly individuals. And when I, had my bout of meningitis, I was hospitalized for several weeks. When I got out, I could barely talk. I had to relearn how to speak. My mind was moving a little more slowly. But as a woman and as a CEO, in a space where most of my contractors were men, I felt compelled to sort of push through. We talked a little bit about the desire of leaders to just push through things, even at their own personal expense. And so I did not heal fully. And within a year of returning back to work, I realized this was not sustainable and my body was not healing at the speed that I needed it to heal at. And I wasn't healing fully. And it was overwhelming, to sort of keep going and have my sort of I would say my system in overdrive. My nervous system was in overdrive, and it was like hyperbolically focused on keeping the pace, and it wasn't necessary. So I stopped working for a little while. At that time, I was engaged, and my fiance had said, "Christina, why don't you come and work for me?" Let me tell you, Shabo, this was the first and only time I've been fired for a job in my life. I was working working with my then fiance, and he said, Christina, after about a year or so, I'm not sure that you got to get out of the house, but you definitely got to get out of the business. And he said, I want you to have a conversation with these two gentlemen. And the guys happened to be in the cannabis sector. One was the CEO of a multi-state operation, which still exists, and it's a good sized operation. And the other was in the healthcare business. And we sat down, had a long conversation, and over the course of 11 months, discussed what a business venture might look like together in pursuit of licensure for cannabis operations in Maryland. Um, so the very long answer is I had a health scare, which led me into doing some things, which introduced me to meeting some people. And then in 2017, I decided, after sort of doing some research in cannabis and taking a variety of classes, visiting facilities all across America, that this was a really interesting burgeoning sector that I wanted to try to get into. And I thought, from the people that I had met, there was an incredible community and ecosystem in cannabis that existed that really aligned in large part with my personal values. And I said, I think this is something that I'm really willing to jump into and give a shot. And so I did. And that birthed the company in 2018 that I currently own as a majority owner and lead. And then in 2019, I started pursuing licensure in Maryland. 2020 and 2021, I was sort of waiting for licensure. 2022, I was licensed. I applied in some other states and got licensed in other states. And that brings us to 2024, and we are operationalizing a fully vertically integrated operation and business in Maryland.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. And, actually, I didn't put two and two together, but I have a friend out in Maryland that is also in the cannabis space. His name is Eugene
Okay.
Monroe. Have you ever crossed paths with Eugene by any chance?
Used to be with GTI, and he was a football player. Yes, I do know who he is. We have crossed paths. We're not friends. We don't like hang out together, but yes, we have been in shared spaces together. Good guy, and was with a really stable company in GTI. They were great.
Yeah. Well, the reason,
They still operate here.
yeah, and the reason why I brought him up was a lot of just the things that you said. I was like, oh wow, that's very much in alignment with this other guy I know. And then I was like, wait, he's in Maryland also. So,
Great,
I just put two and two
great.
together. And you had,
Sorry, I'm just closing up. It's here.
yeah, no problem. No problem. And so, I don't think it's a secret that the cannabis industry is dominated by white men. And I'm
Mm,
just curious.
Not a secret. No.
Yeah, I'm just curious as an African woman, um, you know, what did you experience trying to create a vertically integrated company from 2017 to 2024? I'm just curious what it was like for you. I'm sure there was a lot of challenges, and I'd love to hear from you, what you saw other people were going through, what you were going through, and if there were any specific challenges that were maybe more challenging for you because there weren't a lot of women that looked like you in the industry. And I would just love to hear more about that if you're willing to share.
Yeah. So I think, when I started out in cannabis, I realized early on that cannabis is more than an industry. It's an opportunity to reshape narratives, not around just the plant, but the people that are a part of the cannabis community. It's an opportunity to create equity, and certainly empower people. And I think, many people come into this space with an idea of economic empowerment, which I think is critically important, especially for those who've been disproportionately, impacted by criminalization. But, you know, for me, I was sort of, as I started out, I felt like I was one of one, or at the very least, one of few, right? There were certainly some Latina women in the space for sure, especially on the West Coast. Some African American women in the space. I didn't know many who were African American and Latina. I didn't know any at the time. Um, and we were by far in the minority. We're talking about like less than 2% of the people that I was encountering, and certainly less than 5% of the owners that are represented in our current industry. And so, you know, I'd like to believe, that one of the most important things that you do in business is through relationships. It's building relationships and building community. Um, Early on, I was very fortunate to, look across sort of the cultural spectrum as well as the racial spectrum in this industry and build relationships. Obviously, I know who I am and I know what my races are and how those are represented and show up for me. But I didn't feel like that was a hindrance.
Mm,
I put community first and tried to make sure that our commonalities were what were at the forefront of our conversations. Um, and I was very fortunate to feel, immediately welcomed by a number of people in this space. And so I stand here today. Certainly I've had challenges. Certainly I think that women are challenged with fundraising in this space. That's, is not something that is an unknown. I think sort of people of African American descent, Latinos, a lot of us are very challenged with securing capital. That's not an unknown. But look, we don't have a monopoly on that in the cannabis sector. That is in every sector in America, trying to secure startup capital, whether through the equity or debt raise route, it's very challenging. And on the debt side, certainly there are entire institutions that are set up that do not enable our ability to easily raise on the debt side. So I think, um, I wouldn't point to specific circumstances, but what I would say is it hasn't been easy. It is a day by day effort. That even comes to when you lead other people, right? Like being conscious of who you are and how people see you and view you sometimes is based on your ethnicity, your race, and your gender. And so you do have to be very mindful of how you show up in certain spaces. And that's an effort that not everybody has to make. There are some people that don't have to make that effort. They fucking just show up and things work for them a little differently. I don't find that to be the case for myself. Like I have to be very mindful. And so, it's not without challenge that I can say for sure.
yeah. What I heard in your answer, well, number one is I could definitely empathize. I think I went to my first event in maybe 2014, 2015, and I was
Sure.
definitely the only Asian guy in the room. And I think by 2020, there was tons of Asians, but they were all from China. When I went to MJ BizCon, I
Right.
was like, okay, hey, there's other Asian people here, but I don't really,
Right.
resonate with them either. Um,
Right.
but
Not the same
yeah,
country, not the same culture.
correct. But what I
Mhm.
really loved about what you said was that you were acknowledging yeah, there's definitely things that are more challenging and require some more hoops to jump through. But at the same time, it didn't disempower you. And then I also love how you kind of zoomed out a little bit more, which is like, yeah, this isn't just a cannabis specific problem. This is happening everywhere. And what I really loved about what you said was like, this is an opportunity that we have to kind of reshape the way people kind of view these things. Because I lived in a very progressive area, San Francisco. Now I live in the rural area. So hyper conservative. So, just kind of going from one reality to another reality and just seeing like, okay, this is how progressive people think of conservatives. This is how conservative people think of progressive people. And really understanding like, wow, if I had these views of the other, I would be nervous. I would be anxious. I would be scared. But
Sure.
now this is truly like, I feel like the universe told me to move to this area because they call me like the snowflake that they love, and they kind of say it like with a lot of, I know they're not being offensive about it, but like, yeah, there's this guy
Yeah.
here that has different views, but he's not just like melting away when we tell him something that he doesn't want to hear. And I really feel like that same type of energy coming from you, which is I acknowledge that things aren't fair and equal right now, but I'm also not going to allow that to disempower me. And at the same time, I'll use this as an
Absolutely.
opportunity to build more community.
Absolutely. And I think, some of this comes from the background that I have in sort of conscious capitalism, but I think collaboration sometimes actually really does beat competition. And the cannabis industry really thrives on shared knowledge and collective growth because we're sort of all sort of raging against the machine. And to some extent, the machine is the government right now, at least at the federal level, because cannabis is bastardized. And the reality is, with it being federally illegal, we have enormous hurdles that we have to climb over on the regulatory side, even at the state level. But at the federal level, we've got tax burdens that are unprecedented and highly unusual and irregular in thriving American businesses. And so for us, I think as cannabis insiders, I'll say, or the cannabis industry, capital C, capital I, we really thrive on sharing knowledge and collective growth. And the reality is there's a space for everybody in here that has the right intention. And so I think I saw that early on and I was like, bet, I have a certain value set with regards to people and putting them first and authenticity and respect. And so I think if you lead with that, doors, at least in my experience, will open.
Mhm.
And so that's how we find ourselves here today.
Yeah, yeah. I told you as I was doing research on you, I was both like, even though I coach a bunch of operators, when I read their backgrounds, I'm like, wow, they're just so impressive. And what really
Yeah.
made me so eager to speak with you was the conscious capitalism, the
Mm.
servant leader, things that I read about
Mhm.
you. And I believe like these, I don't want to say they're just buzzwords, but I feel like a lot of people
Yeah.
use these buzzwords and not a lot of people um, live by the way that they're communicating. And so I'm curious, like when you talk about conscious capitalism and servant leadership, how do you define it?
Yeah. So first of all, the servant leadership thing is actually it's embedded in me. I think my family, I've said this before, my family has a lot to do with how I show up in this world. My mother is a Cuban immigrant. She moved here when she was 4. My father's African American. He lived in a segregated community up until his mother, my grandmother, actually helped desegregate the schools. Um, and the two of them are big on servant leadership and um, being mindful of yourself, being respectful of everybody that you come in contact with, even people that work for you, and especially those people. Um, but when I was in college, I did a paper on Southwest Airlines, and they've long been recognized for their commitment to servant leadership, sort of this philosophy that emphasizes like prioritizing the needs of employees and customers to foster, positive organizational culture and achieve business success. And Herb Keller, the co-founder and former CEO of Southwest Airlines, was a pioneer in implementing servant leadership within the company. And if you think back to that organization 15 years ago, you can probably remember what that felt like. He put his employees first. They in turn provide exceptional service to customers, leading to overall organizational success. It wasn't the fanciest airline in the world, but he absolutely maintained an attitude of empowering employees, encouraging innovation, and just maintaining a people-centric culture. And then I think Colin Barrett sort of continued that legacy after him. So for me, I think it's like been a part of sort of my upbringing, my educational upbringing. It was like paramount to how I graduated from grad school, right? Like I did this paper on it because I believed in it. I thought that, Southwest Airlines, it wasn't like the Bentley of the skies, but I loved getting on their planes. People were friendly, like the cockpit. They were cracking jokes out of the cockpit all of the time. If we hit shitty weather, they'd make a joke about it. Like, I hope you have your seatbelts on, family, because we could take a nosedive, but we could also be okay. And they lighten the mood and they were allowed to freely be themselves. And I think if you hire the right people and you let people be themselves, dude, you're going to succeed. You have to put your trust in the people that you're hiring to bring to life the company that you're building. And so after grad school, I had a variety of different jobs that I think certainly led to where I am today. All of them have played an integral role in building the skill set and the little toolbox that I have now to be a leader. But one of them was at Conscious Capitalism. And the theory sort of behind conscious capitalism, and I still see it this way, is that in order to sort of operate this conscious business, you've got to have sort of these 4 components of sort of consciousness. Purpose, and that's like the idea that every business has a purpose that is bigger than just making money, and it's focused on sort of your true north.
Mhm.
Second is like stakeholder engagement. You kind of want to create value for various stakeholders. That's your employees, your vendors, your investors, your community. and your customers. And conscious businesses recognize the interdependency of these stakeholders. Again, back to that ecosystem of community, and the value that should be created for all of them equally. The third concept in conscious business is sort of conscious capitalism is conscious like leadership. And what I think of there is definitely servant leadership. Leaders sort of embrace the higher purpose and focus on creating value and harmony for stakeholders, but they're the practitioners of putting other people before like just profits. Because businesses are not made up of profits, they're made up of people, right? And we're not doing business with profits, we're doing business with people. If you don't like certain people, you're not going to probably do business with them. And so the concept of like just sort of conscious leadership is people are at the heart of what we do, and they really have to be at the forefront of our minds. All of the stakeholders have to be at the forefront of our minds as we're leading organizations. And then that last concept, so it's purpose, stakeholder sort of engagement, servant leadership for me, and then culture. These are just sort of your ethos, your principles, the practicing of what you believe and sort of the social fabric of your business. And so, I think that's what connects stakeholders to your products, and your people, and obviously your services if you're selling services. And it's the culture that you bring to the community and that ecosystem. So those are sort of the four components of conscious capitalism for me. And I mean, I can tell you inside of the business, you don't see four bubbles anywhere. You don't see these colors, that are associated with conscious capitalism. These, like I think it's blue, orange, yellow. You don't see all of that, but it is a part of who I am. And it's a part of how I develop the mission and how we developed, sort of the people and culture department, which is our human resource equivalent in this company. But we say people and culture because that's the most important part of this business. It's not just human resources. It's like the culture that they are building together because they're all a part of this. Like, I'm not building the business on my own. My executive assistant, my head of retail operations, my head of cultivation, my marketers, my street team, like all of them are a part of this culture and organization. So, it's a struggle, honestly, but if it's something you believe in, the walk is a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first off, I feel like I could literally listen to you speak all day. Really just love what you're saying.
Probably would not want to. I can tell you that. I can tell you that.
Well, second of all is, are you familiar with the concept of holonic thinking?
No, I'm not. So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you say holonic, I got to tell you, it sounds a little bit like colonic.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's not what it is. I hope there's no relation, but tell me, I've never heard of it.
No, it's not colonic. Although I may need to get a colonic at some point, given my age these days.
Right.
But holonic thinking. So holons, the concept of holons is that a holon is its own self-sufficient, independent, functioning piece, but it belongs to something bigger. And so a good example of holons would be a cell is a holon to a human is a holon to a city is a holon to a state, and then up to the universe and the galaxies. Yep. Or another would be like a screw is a holon to an engine, engine is a holon to a car is a holon to mass transit, things of that nature. And so there's an interdependency in holonic thinking, and to flat businesses. And in the flat businesses, there was like no leader. So as you can imagine, when everything was a democratic vote, it would be like impossible to get things done. But we also knew that top-down management was not something that seemed like sustainable. Like you can only grind yourself for a few years before you start burning out. So the thought of holonic thinking, or I don't know if this is in the collective consciousness of operators, but I had stumbled upon this type of thinking, which is since the holons are interdependent on each other, what would be great for businesses if they started, instead of hierarchies, they thought about holarchies. And holarchies is we value every single person in the value chain. the entry level independent contributors, the managers, the directors, the VPs, all the way to the C-suite. And because they're all interdependent, it's not like this top down, like we still need leadership, but the leaders aren't going to make 100x more than the individual contributors. We all know that in order for sales and marketing to work, we need the people that are supporting sales and marketing and so on in every single department. And so the idea behind Holonic thinking was very similar to what you are talking about, which is just really valuing everyone in your company, understanding like the admin, the person doing facilities is just as important as the sales guy that is closing the multi-million-dollar deal. And to make sure that everyone, feels like the work that they're putting in is seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that, the people just coming up with a strategy aren't the ones that are taking home the largest percentage of the revenue coming in.
Mhm. I think that's really interesting. I think it feels like holonic thinking would resonate with me because it aligns with my belief in interconnectedness, whether it's in business or community or personal growth. I guess it sounds like it's a concept that would challenge us to see beyond the isolated issues and recognize the dynamic relationship within systems. And at Standard Wellness Maryland, where we are, I certainly think about how each of my decisions, as a leader, from cultivation to employee policies to marketing products, it contributes to a broader mission of community and well-being and sort of industry revolution or evolution, both. But I could see how I'd have to probably learn a little bit more, but I'm glad that you brought it up as something for me to dive into. I'm totally open to learning. The one thing that I tell my daughter all the time, Vivian, who we were talking about earlier, is, you know, first of all, in our household, we've got some models. The first model is nothing is ever the end of the world.
Mm.
I want to create a culture where if you screw up, welcome to being a human being. Like, this is just what happens. We all make mistakes and we got to step back, like not lose our minds over it. And we'll fix it together. Because when you create a culture where people don't understand that nothing is at the end of the world, they hide stuff. They start to hide and you create liars, right? Like, we train people to be liars if we can't accept difficult things that they share with us. Or hiders, which for me is just as difficult to deal with and it's just as unhealthy. And so that's one thing, like nothing is the end of the world. And the other thing is, like, so long as you're here and I'm here, like, we're going to go at this thing together. So we are very much so a team, in our household. And I think, I'm totally open to learning and growing because I realize that we're imperfect, and there are so many people on my team that know so much more than I do. And I welcome their feedback. Like, I don't know that I always take it gracefully. I'm trying to, I'm a work in progress for sure. But I certainly have the heart to grow and learn more. So I'm glad you shared the concept with me because I'll dig into that
Yeah.
now that I know about it.
Yeah. Well, I knew you would be receptive to it. And I just really love your energy. Like what I really love is that, the level of self-awareness I feel that you have is very high. Like, yeah, I'm trying to do this, but some days I do it better than others. And I do feel like that's very important because, at least for me, when I started learning about these concepts of being like more grateful or being more open and receptive to constructive feedback, like there would be days that I would be very good at that. And then other days where
Yeah.
I totally would fail at it. And then I would be really tough on
Yeah.
myself. Like, hey, I should know better. Why am I not being receptive? And
Yeah.
then that just started its own like negative feedback loop. So I'm really glad that you could even address like, yeah, like some days I'm really good at it. And other days, sometimes I don't like hearing about like the constructive feedback that I get from people.
Yeah, it is. It's really tough. We all have ego that shows up in us. And I'm trying to check that. And, I find it hard sometimes because being an entrepreneur sometimes can be really isolating. And I don't have a peer group that all own their own businesses. I've got successful people, in terms of how society would view success. I've got moderately successful people around me, but when it comes to being free thinkers, people who are liberated, in how they lead, people that are driven by a higher purpose and again, a true north consistently, Um, that I would not say is abundant in my space these days. And so sometimes it's really hard to have a clearly defined set of values and try to build off of that. Because when you hit a brick wall or when you have challenges, you may not have a peer group to say, "Hey, I need your help." Like I'm exploring YPO right now. And I don't know if that'll be my tribe. They seem like some pretty amazing. There are individuals in there that are amazing. I was having a conversation last week with some folks in that group who have, gone on several like ayahuasca retreats. And those people that I was speaking with, I felt were very self-aware, very purposeful in how they were living. I'm not sure that everybody is like that, of course, but I do find being an entrepreneur at times to be very isolating, and to be the type of entrepreneur looking the way that I look, being a woman, right? Being of color, these little things that are just really the tip of the iceberg of who I am. But that's what so many people see first. And being sort of one of very, very few, it is hard to find that peer group community. It doesn't have to even look like me, but that can relate to the experience to help one get through it. It's sometimes very hard. Like, I come home, my mother lives with me, and she helps me with Vivian because it's hard to run a business and be a decent mom. Like my poor kid wouldn't eat if it were up to me. Honestly, I don't cook very well, and I normally burn food because my mind is in 400 different places, and I forget the timing of things. I can season, but I can't cook all that well. And she, I get home and sometimes like I just want to cry in my mom's arms. Like I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And I thank God for having sort of that divine feminine energy in my household to say, "Hey, sister, I have you and you're amazing, Christina. Like keep going." And I thank God that she's in my space and sort of keeping me lifted. But the challenges are very, very palatable, on a day-to-day basis. So, I think to the extent that one is navigating anything consciously, they're going to feel it. All you can do is sort of make adjustments along the way and try to lead with grace too. I think for myself and for other people, when I make mistakes, I have to kind of sit back and like, whew, that didn't feel good. I didn't move the right way on that one. I kind of stepped in shit and drug it along the carpet. But let me clean this up and let's not try to step in it again, but it really is it's a process. You have to be hyper aware on the journey.
Yeah. Wow. There was so much to unpack in that, but maybe the first thing I would say back to you is number one, I totally can empathize with the feeling of isolation and not
Mm,
just feeling like
mm,
people don't understand, but not seeing anyone maybe that looked like me or sounded like me. And then on top of that, wanting to run the business in a certain way with a certain level of morals and ethics and seeing other
yeah,
people maybe saying the same things, but perhaps not behaving with the same action as their words and those things not being congruent and feeling really isolated. And I really love that you
yeah,
brought up YPO. I did a talk for a couple YPO groups when cannabis was still or just getting started and they were interested. And I do believe like these types of
yeah.
communities are really valuable. I mean, it is kind of expensive to be a part of it, but they are very
It's
valuable.
super expensive.
Yeah.
It's super expensive. Like you need to be already pretty well off in order to join. I'm sure that there are, I think Vista, there are some other organizations that the entry point is a little less, but yeah, they expect that you're coming with it. You're getting all the bags before you join.
Yep.
and and you and you can afford it. And I think on paper it looks like we should be able to, but I can tell you like I'm brutally navigating this space because we pay about an effective tax rate of between 70 and 80% on the dollar. So we have very, very narrow margins. In order for us to survive, I mean, we gotta live on like no profits. We have to starve ourselves to some extent. I think people just assume that if you're in the cannabis space, you're making money. Like the business can be good, but the profits are not. The construct under which we're operating. with the burdensome tax structures that we have as illegal entities at the federal level, they're beyond, I think, most people's comprehension, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
I think people see the top line revenue and they have no idea what the EBITDA is. And then they would be really, really shocked when that happens.
Shocked. Like that number gets real small when you drop down below revenue and look at EBITDA. I mean, you're like, what happened to those numbers? It's like a disappearing act almost. They evaporate, quite frankly. And so I don't think most people have any insight into what some of the business leaders are up against in this sector. It's so much more than just being a business executive. There are so many other decisions you're faced with. Like I had, one of my shops is opening up late. We anticipated a 3-week sort of overage where we may not potentially be open on time, but not a multi-month delay. And that costs real money. The opportunity cost is we're not bringing in capital or cash at that time, and we're not making money. And that can be pretty significant on a dispensary, right? The cash flow can be pretty heavy. But at the same time, we have staff. We've got a lot of overhead. And for us, that's, close to, $80,000 a month. It's huge. And you have to think about, if your people are really first, do you keep them employed? Do you furlough? What does a furlough look like? How long is this? When do you say it? How do you say it? We're up against the holidays. So these are all of the things that come into play in cannabis. It's hard to hire for people because not everybody has cannabis experience. Anybody can sell a t-shirt, but you can't sell a medical good the way that you sell a t-shirt. You have to be knowledgeable and trained. And so there are so many more considerations, I think, as a cannabis business executive that are unique to this space, that make it even more of a challenge when you want to do things the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also brought up one of my favorite 4-syllable words in the world, which is ayahuasca.
Oh, ayahuasca. Oh man. So yeah, tell me about that. Tell me what you're thinking about this.
Well, ayahuasca came. So I've been a huge proponent of plant medicines for a very long time. In college, I ate mushrooms. I dropped acid quite a bit and didn't really understand like how it was really expanding my mind. I just thought it was, fun and games, but it really, I believe, allowed me to think at a much deeper level, for lack of a better description, kind of pull myself out of the matrix of life and see things from a different perspective. Now, when I was taking these exogenous molecules, even ones like DMT called the spirit molecule, I thought, okay, well, hey, I'm interacting with entities. It's called the spirit molecule. Well, of course, this is what's supposed to happen. So even though I was having these deep transcendent experiences, I still felt like, well, I took something from the outside that was supposed to give me this, but it was very healing. Now, when it comes to ayahuasca, the reason why that perked up my ears is that came on my radar probably in 2010, but I didn't do ayahuasca until earlier this year. And so it's been this thing that I've been thinking about doing for about 14 years. And having done it, what I could say is I did a lot of healing over the last 3 years. So I took a break from cannabis from 2020 to 2023, just moved out to a rural area, grew my own food, just became a hippie, and found so many things that were in my shadows that I never addressed. Now, when I finally drank ayahuasca, it just started peeling back the onion layers even further. And yes, it was very painful. It was not a pleasant experience. I went for 2 nights. Each night I puked probably no less than 15 times. But
oh my God,
the interesting thing is, as I was purging, I intuitively knew that this was a lot of shadows, blocked trauma, emotions that I haven't processed that were just releasing. So I began enjoying the purge. And what it was really teaching me was they were having me continually drink more water because I had nothing left in my stomach.
Right.
And they called it warrior medicine. So in my mind, I was like, well, it's been 14 years. I better just, stay in this and do,
you're a warrior,
and do what they tell me.
Yeah, let's go.
And what it taught me was, it taught me a lot of really important things. But I would say one of the most powerful things that I learned, Christina, was to just be in the moment. When I project my consciousness into the past, to worry about things that happened in the past, or when I project my consciousness into the future to identify problems that haven't happened yet, that is when the mental suffering occurs. Now, I also know
Mhm.
as a CEO and founder, it's really hard not to project to the past or the future because you're trying to make the best
Yeah.
decisions. And what it was telling me was, it was like, Seibo, you will know what you need to know when you need to know it. And I have heard this spiritual comment like maybe 3 years ago, but I didn't really understand like what it meant until I was puking my guts out. And when I was
Yeah.
puking, all I could think about was, I can't wait for this experience to be over. I want to be sleeping in my own bed. I'm sleeping like on the dirt floor here with a bunch of other people puking, and it's not comfortable. And as soon as
Right.
it made me realize that the past and the future are both illusions. Everything is happening right now, right now, right now, right now.
Mhm.
Is that when I am in the
Mhm.
present moment, there is no mental suffering. And when I am present, I can tap into not just my higher mind, but combine my divine masculine with my divine feminine and really become a holistic thinker, not just one that is focused on logical, rational, linear thinking. And then not the other,
Yeah.
just letting my intuition and my joy lead me and really be able to
God.
combine the two
Mhm.
into one. And so that was my experience with ayahuasca. And it also let me let go of what I believed were betrayals. Like I
Oof.
I was one of my good friends talked to the board
Yeah.
and I got removed from the company that I founded. And I always felt this very, very deep betrayal from him. And even though I was
Yeah.
meditating 90 minutes a day, every so often I would think about him and go, dude, I'm going to kill that guy when
Yeah.
I see him. My wife would
Yeah.
be like, what's
Yeah.
wrong? And so during the ayahuasca ceremony, what came to me was that, yeah, I was the collateral damage to the betrayal, but he didn't betray me. He betrayed himself. He knew that I would have been an
Mhm.
asset. And not only did it switch my memories of my friendship with, I don't want to mention his name, but it also
Sure.
rewrote the history of every other betrayal that I had in my life where I felt like it was on me, but it was really the person betraying themselves. I just happened to be the person that caught the collateral damage. And I like to share
Yeah.
that story with other founders because I think many founders, if you're anything like myself, and I'm pretty sure you are, is like you look at the well being of your employees like they're your family. And there's a lot of pressure. I know there was a lot of pressure for me to make the right decision, to make sure they could provide for their families. And I was willing to
Yeah.
go without what I needed in order to help them along. And what I
I've
realized,
done that.
yeah, and what I ended up realizing was, just like Southwest will tell you, hey, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your kids, is when you save
Yeah.
yourself, you are saving other people. And healing yourself
Yeah.
is the most important thing. If we want to bring this country back together, it's not about telling anybody what to do. It's allowing people to heal themselves and not feel like they're coming from a deficit or that they're less than, and that they could make decisions based on feeling whole and complete versus feeling like less than. And when you're making decisions based on scarcity, whether they're personal or professional decisions, it's usually never the right decision. So getting into a place of abundance to make empowering decisions, I have found to be the way that so many people have, course corrected the direction of their life, and they are able to be happy personally without sacrificing any of their professional
Yep.
performance.
So you've said so much in that. I hear over and over again that people's journey with ayahuasca has taught them lessons about healing and surrendering and the here and now. I know it's not a magical solution for sort of introspection, and that we've got to be really sensitive to honoring the roots for mental health if we're going to use it, the roots of this thing and its transformative potential. But I would share that, I am a little bit like terrified. It keeps coming up into my space. And I've had guides who I know were coming out of the cannabis space and then now they're in, into shrooms and psilocybins and they are like, Christina, you really ought to consider ayahuasca. Like, I think that you're at a place where you can do this. But I think the the unknown for me. Like I kind of know where we're going to get to, but the impact of getting there on what is right here before me is like, oh, no control there. And the reality is we never have any control, right? But I'm like, we don't have any control. So it's not real that is going to be disruptive. It'll probably be contributory, and my ideation will grow and my capacity will grow and so many things will unlock. But that's one of those that's one of probably the only things in my life that I feel like I gotta get to or get towards. And it's a little bit scary for me. I don't have many fears at all. Not at all. Um, but that's one fear that I have. And I'm like, oh, I want to do this, but I certainly I cannot foresee what's going to end up happening here. I think it'll be good, but what is going to happen to this business? Am I going to be like, I don't want any part of this anymore? And what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for my future? I've put investments into this, other people's investments are in it. So it's kind of, like I said, it's just one of the few fears that I have. I certainly would need a good, guide through that journey. And I'm looking forward to sort of going through that experience. Yeah, that's all I can say, I suppose, at this point, but it is something that I'm looking towards for sure.
This may or may not be a surprise to you, but my clients are like 90% women. Most of my clients are women, and
not shocking.
I have a pretty good insight, I believe. Most of the women have said similar things like, man, this is like really surrendering control, and being able to surrender that control is difficult for the nervous system. And I believe you're absolutely right to be fearful and respectful of this journey, and you're also right that it's not a one-stop shop. It is a catalyst for more growth, but the heavy lifting happens after the ayahuasca journey. And I would say the number one thing that I hear from men and women are, if this is such a big transformation, will I kind of lose my edge when it comes to business? And what I could tell you is absolutely not. It gives you more clarity. It gives you the ability to trust your own instincts even more. I know that one of the areas that I felt I failed as an operator was I was so afraid that my investors wouldn't keep investing in me, that I would just do whatever they wanted me to do. And many times, some of the decisions were that ultimately caved the company came from the investors. And I was like, man, I really wish I could have just trusted myself more. And I believe that if I had done those plant medicine ceremonies earlier, I would have known, oh, they're just the people that are funding the company. I'm the one that knows everything, not them. I really trusted myself. And if you're looking for a guide, my guide, he has a PhD in biomedical engineering. He was the chief culture officer of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He quit his job because he was an atheist, but he had a spiritual awakening like myself. And we both went from people that valued logic, rationality, science, to people that became much more open to things that our five senses maybe couldn't pick up on, but that our heart could begin feeling. And to me, he is like the best person to take high performing individuals and shepherd them into this more spiritual world and really combine the logical and rational with the intuitive and emotional so that we could truly co-create the world that we want to be living in.
I'm open to that. So I'd love to be connected. I am sensitive to the fact that it's a sacred ritual embedded in like centuries of wisdom in this universe. So it's not, I realize this is not a one-stop shop. And I think I respect the process so much and the origins that I'm not taking that lightly. I'm like, that shit is not, I'm not playing with that. Like I need to be prepared in so much as ready for the openness that will be experienced and the unlocking / unleashing that'll be experienced too. Because I am aware of my power and I don't even know the full extent of it, but it is strong. My energy is strong. My power is extraordinarily strong. So I think stepping into that process of unlocking it could be extraordinary, like, out of this world. And I just want to make sure like it's a process I'm prepared for to the extent that I can say, I'm ready. Okay, let's do this now, you know?
Yeah. Well, when the time is right, your
So,
soul will speak to you. And yeah, my friend,
yeah.
he put me through a 6-week regiment where I had to journal. I had
Oh,
to write all this stuff. He was checking in on me on my diet, how I
awesome.
was sleeping. He said no sex with my wife for
Yeah.
2 weeks before. After the ayahuasca ceremony, we met 5 more times to make sure everything was
Yeah.
integrated. So I think it would be something that, would really appeal to
Okay.
you, like that type of approach. But
I'm totally open. I'm totally open to it.
yeah. Well, let's segue into something else because I feel like this was getting more into
Yeah.
me pitching you on ayahuasca versus me learning about you.
No, no.
But, standard wellness, the
Yeah.
branding, the ethos. I'm just curious, how did you come up with all of that?
Yeah. So it actually started with my holdings company. It's called Rooted Therapeutics. And that one was pretty simple. I mean, I was rooted in family. And so for me, it was incredibly important to have a name that was reflective of my commitment to sort of my honoring my legacy and history and being rooted in values. So that's how the name Rooted Therapeutics, obviously, the therapeutics being closely tethered to cannabis, the plant. That's how that came about. And then I would say, I partnered with Standard Wellness, and Standard Wellness is out of Ohio. In our partnership discussions early on, they were basically unwilling to budge on some things, willing to budge on others. And, as a first time entrepreneur, one of the things I was willing to cave on was the name. So Standard Wellness actually came from their name. Though I maintain, uh, majority ownership and also control of the company, I very much so lean on that existing sort of sister entity for advice, their experiential knowledge, understanding their downfalls and where they came up short or wish that they could do things differently. I rely on their experiences for our growth and what we're doing here in Maryland. And then the forest is the name of our dispensary, of course. And there's a lot there, but the long and short of it is um, that name was also one that was associated with the company that they already had. And so, we agreed that we would take on as we built out this new company, the forest name as well. And there's so much there. I don't know if you want me to go into that. Um, but I can tell you about the forest too. But that was the foundation of Standard Wellness Maryland. It was through the partnership.
Got it. Got it. Well, I love the origin story of Rooted Therapeutics. That's just really cool. And, regarding the forest, well, what I wanted to ask you actually was, out of all the things that you're working on right now, what is most exciting for you? What do you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so we had this incredible idea behind the forest, which is going to be our flagship store over in Baltimore and Canton, which is an incredible neighborhood and community in Baltimore. And it is experiencing sort of a rebirth of arts and community and music and business. And I just absolutely cannot say anything negative about that area or the people in it. It's a wonderful place to be. But this month upcoming in December, we hope to have the grand opening. We had hoped to have had it this month. That didn't happen. But that's okay. It gave us actually a little bit more time to connect with the community there. And the forest was inspired by the idea of natural growth and community and balance and finding oneself. Forests are typically a place of renewal and interconnectedness. Again, that sort of ecosystem where you have a diversity of elements coming together to create this thriving ecosystem. And that's the environment that we're cultivating at our shop, not just for our dispensary, but for the cannabis industry as a whole. And so we feel like our environment is going to be vibrant and alive and resilient, and obviously plant based. And that aligns with what we want to offer. And the forest is sort of a metaphor for healing and exploration and grounding and transformative power and the power of cannabis and the connection it fosters between people and nature. And so when you come into our dispensary, there will be an entire experience that you'll have. Everything is in cream and neutrals, browns, green tones, basically lots of wood, lots of natural plants inside of there. The space has a 2-story atrium. It's marble everywhere in the atrium. It's gorgeous. And on the inside of the actual controlled space, the ceilings are lower. It feels like a forest. The ceilings are wood. The floors are a natural stone, but everything is like green, brown, foresty. It's so amazing. I love the space. The people that work there have undergone countless weeks of training at this point because we didn't open when we had hoped to. And so they have had the benefit of having additional training over the course of the last 3 weeks. And we're just so excited to be a part of Canton. Like we have connected with some great local organizations, Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're hoping to do some educational outreach on wellness together, which you often don't see, big healthcare getting involved in cannabis, but we're hoping to do some education in the community together. We've got Merrick Gyms, which is right next to us. It's a huge facility, and we're going to be having on top of sort of, your yoga and Pilates classes that our patrons would also be able to do. We're going to co-host wellness activities and events and activations for folks. They've got an incredible pool on their upper deck, which is absolutely popping during the summertime. And we've got a number of local restaurants who want to do things with us. I've got a food tour company he's like a gastronaut entrepreneur, and he wants to take people around to these places all throughout Baltimore and talk about amazing brew, great food. And he's bringing people to our dispensary. He's adding dispensary to that tour, which is cool because I think cannabis is now, I think, growing as like a tourism industry pool as well. Like I think that cannabis and tourism are definitely doing their thing right now in a number of states. In Maryland, I've got a friend who's working in cannabis tourism, which is kind of cool too. We are launching with a woman's brand called Glow. And so we're trying to create some products that would appeal to women, not just because of the formulation, but also the packaging. It's discreet, small dosing. You can dose throughout the day. I'm thinking of soccer moms or, who have to sit at these games and they're like, literally would rather be anywhere else. We love our kids, but it is mind-numbingly boring at times, or it's like, or it's like stressful. You got to be there freaking all day. I'm a volleyball mom, and it's like, my God. So I think sort of micro dosing is something we want to encourage women in particular to consider when entering into this sort of new territory of self-exploration and growth and managing your everyday. And so we're excited about the Glow line. We're excited about the Forest brand. Love my team members. I've got some dope folks that are working with us, and they have like pounded the pavement and been out talking to people. It's been so good. So we expect to launch this year. We'll tell you more. If you come to Maryland, we'd love for you to come out, and the same for your listeners. I think a lot of them are probably, tech folks and maybe not necessarily here in Maryland, but if any of your listeners would love to come out, we'd love to have them as well. And so that's a little bit about who we are and what we're doing with this new brand and some of the products we're offering. We're excited.
Wow. I feel the excitement, and I love that you gave me kind of the backstory on the Forest name. And I do trust that the delays are all divine timing as you're building more community and just connecting the dots with more people. I really do believe that. And, I really didn't want to say this because it feels like I'm self-serving myself. But the reason why I designed this particular vaporizer right here is my wife and I, we went in for a couples massage. And before we had the massage, I was just looking around the waiting room area, and there was this waterfall sculpture there, and the water was cascading over these river rocks. And I just grabbed one of the rocks, and we actually modeled it after this one, and it just felt so like soothing and comforting in my hand. I put it in my wife's hand. She agreed, and then immediately I was just like, you know what? This is going to be a great shape for these types of devices. Most of these types of devices, either they're long and thin, remind you of like a joint, or they look like or a nicotine looking device. And they're all, I want to say, more, I don't know, phallic in shape. And I felt like this had like a much more like feminine shape to it. It doesn't have straight lines. It's more curvy. It's asymmetrical. And I guess, I just wanted to kind of share that story with you as you were thinking about a women's line, because, a lot of the designers in this space, I believe they just design for their boys, like, what do my boys like? And there's not a lot of things that I think are designed specifically for women. And even though this is gender neutral, it was inspired by, the experience my wife and I had. And she hates, like, she says when she's
Ah,
going through her clutch, like the vape pen feels just like her makeup pencils. And, this thing has like
yeah.
it's easier for her to find and just, interact with.
Yeah, I think there are a few brands who have really done the packaging of their products well. Even in the outer packaging, Wild is one of them. They're a woman owned, right? Led brand. You open it up and it's like a gift box. You open it and it's like, ooh, it's like this little, it's almost like origami, like this, ooh, magical little gift box, like these pretty little fanciful designs on it and stuff. And we don't sometimes put enough intention behind our products. We're like, oh, pre-rolls are selling well, make some pre-rolls, or vapes are doing well, let's develop some vapes. And I think there's so much more to like providing something to a populace that is based on what they want. Like, ask these people what they want. I can tell you, my girlfriends, they want shit that they can take into their offices and not get nailed for using. If it spills out of their purse, nobody's like, oh, they're a cannabis user, because it's still a little bit taboo. And so we want to protect our users, and we want to get them to a place where they're not judged for being clients and for being, for partaking in cannabis consumption. And sometimes that starts off with just being a little bit more discreet and mindful with packaging. And eventually, the more we normalize it and the more people we are able to normalize it for and with, the more broadly people are able to sort of, no pun intended, consume the concept of cannabis. It'll be appetizing for them, but we've got to push past like the immediate sort of finger pointing and judgment shit that happens in our world. And I think, a starting place for that is helping people like go low and go slow, helping them with like discreet packaging that they can have. It might look like a lipstick container, right? Like it might be shaped like MAC lipstick. And then that way it's in their bag and nobody's pulling it out and waving it around like, you use, it's something we can feel good about and not feel like immediately judged or called out for. So sometimes we just have to, we always should be listening to the consumers because they tell us what they want. I mean, right? Like I tell people what I want,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's dope. I love the river rock concept that you have. It's really pretty. It's smooth. It does look like a rock. So that's great. And I like the fact that you guys came up with it together at a spa. Hey, I'm a big spa goer. Like the way to my heart, I think, is through a massage. It's pretty bad. I'm weak. You give me a massage, who knows what's gonna happen? Like I was really like, I love massages. I love spas, and I love being at peace, and being able to sit in a quiet space and just sit with myself. I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, number
yeah.
one,
So anyway,
I'm so happy that you're in the industry and you're speaking the way that you do. I feel like you are really helping normalize and destigmatize the industry and just doing it in such a elevated way. The thoughtfulness into your dispensaries, into the products. This is definitely, I believe we all, like you said, we all need to think more deeply about this. Like, who is using it? What challenges might they be going through? And you actually gave me some ideas. I was like already thinking about like lipstick vapes and mascara vapes and things of that nature to really have like just a little
yes,
bit more discretion. And what I wanted to leave with is, this is the bonus question that we usually get to at the end, which is, I love to actually, before we get to the bonus question, just this thing about
yeah,
massages. Like I also
yeah.
love massages, and my wife likes getting massages from me. Doesn't like giving me massages as much in return, but that's neither here nor there. But one thing about massages that I realized was that, you know, I believe, yeah, of course, massages are really great for the body, but what requires what is required for a massage session to be great is you need to have like kind of full trust and surrender to your massage therapist. And I do believe that being able to touch another human, feel another human is such a connecting thing.
Intimate.
Yeah, very intimate. And so I really believe like there is like a power in this modality of healing people outside of just, it feels good while they're doing it. And then to get to the bonus question is, well, I love to really open up the floor. I ask a ton of questions, and I always love to leave the last 5 minutes to say, well, Christina, what is most important to you? What is top of mind for you? What is it that you feel is important to communicate to the world?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, I really appreciate you giving me that. I think the massage piece is pretty interesting, and I'm going to talk about that for just one
Yeah.
second. I think um the only way that I was able to sort of pursue this journey with any degree of confidence, it's not because I was already in cannabis, it's not because I had been an entrepreneur. Um, it's because I have a degree of humility and vulnerability um that allowed me to surrender to believing I could be successful. And when I prayed over and meditated over whether I needed to go into this space and I heard go, I went. I didn't have a path. I didn't have money. There was nothing that would make me confident in knowing I'd be successful other than I'm supposed to be going in this direction. I'm gonna listen to this spirit guide and I'm going. The rest of this stuff will just figure itself out. Um, and I'm gonna step in this. I know I can be successful in all of these other areas of my life. I'm gonna just walk into this dark space and we're gonna bring light into it. And this is gonna be a powerful thing. I think what I would say is that whether it's for your entrepreneurs that are listening or just any listeners that you have, and what I would offer is that strength and power comes through vulnerability
Mm,
and being able to sort of relinquish control, um, being able to be honest about flaws and the icky stuff. It allows trust. Um, and I think that's been instrumental for me in order to be a good leader. Like I gotta kind of put my hands up sometimes and be like, oh, I definitely messed up. That was me. In fact, I have to do it a lot. I don't know about every day, but pretty darn close. I've got to be the one that's vulnerable and takes that first step and be like, I screwed up. That was me in order for other people to then do that. And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's when you're cooking with grease because true connection comes from being seen and heard without
mm,
judgment. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. But my God, when trust is present, it creates this really safe space where I can share what matters, where other people can share what matters. And then we know motivators. And that openness is where like real understanding and growth begins. So I would just say thank you for sharing about that massage moment and that comment, because I think um, so much of it is rooted in trust and vulnerability and the ability to not be in control. And I think that's a perfect segue for what I just shared about what matters the most, um, especially in leadership and as you build or enter into a new venture or a new community. It's not an easy journey, but is absolutely a necessary one for people who want to experience growth and really be successful. And that's not just monetarily wealthy or achieve a degree of economic success, but be successful at like sort of imprinting in this world, leaving positive effects on other people, engaging them and activating them so that they can be their best selves. All of this power, that's real power and success. But it requires you to first sort of yield and be like, all right, let me be vulnerable. Let me walk into this dark space. Let me trust that I'll get through it. Let me breathe my way through. Let me connect with incredible people. Let me help them help me, right? I gotta say, you know more than me, or I made a mistake. So you can help guide me and allow yourself to go on that journey. And I think that that's where that golden nugget is at the end of the road. I'm still on the road, but that's what I would share,
oh man,
you know.
there was so many knowledge bombs in what you just dropped there. And I wanted to acknowledge you for trusting your guides, and really following what your guides were leading you to. And to be honest, what you just said is usually the end result of all of my coaching sessions with my clients is, oh, I could trust my guides. I could trust my intuition, and I don't need to have everything mapped out. I could just take one step forward at a time. And of course, having more visibility into what's coming is great, but you don't have to have everything figured out before you start. And really, I love like the surrender and the vulnerability to really build that connection to other people, your direct reports, your investors. And so I believe there is so much that people could extrapolate out of what you just said. And so before we leave, if people want to get connected with you or want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, they can find me under my full name, and that's Christina Betancourt Johnson, and that's Betancourt Johnson, Johnsson. So Christina Betancourt Johnson on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's Cannachris _. So it's CANNACHRIS with an underscore. And then my dispensary here is the Forest Baltimore on Instagram. And certainly Standard Wellness Maryland has a page on Instagram as well. We've got a website, and it's standardwellness.com that has all of the sister companies on there in Missouri, Utah, and Ohio. Baltimore is on there. Maryland is on there as well. And we are operationalizing our cultivation and processing arms of the business right now. And so I am around. I'm busy because I'm in the middle of operationalizing these things, but also fundraising, which is definitely a task,
Second job.
But if somebody oh man, it's a whole third, fourth, and fifth job, Seibo, but I will make myself available to the extent that I can. I'll do everything that I can to make myself available. So that is how I can be reached.
Beautiful. Well, I will put those in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know that you're a parent, an entrepreneur, you're raising money. So that's a lot. And I would love to continue our relationship. Anything that I could do, connect you with, just consider me an ally in every single way. And you are just such a beautiful person inside and out. I am so happy that Zoe put us together and that we got to spend over an hour just speaking to each other without any interruptions, which is very rare in today's day and age with smartphones. And so I just wanted to really acknowledge and reflect back to you that you have a huge fan in me. I value your time. And I feel like my next guest has really big shoes that they need to fill.
What? Well, thank you for having me on and for asking me questions and sharing about your journey too, and giving me space to feel comfortable, because that's a gift. That's a talent that's not natural for a lot of people. So I appreciate you allowing me to be at ease and you guiding me through the conversation. If I can be supportive of you, I would say the same thing. I'll certainly share this episode on our end and we'll cross promote it. And if I can be of support to you, or if you come out here, I hope to meet you in person. That would be great.
I will. I had lump crab once and I haven't stopped thinking about it ever since then. So I will be out there.
Yeah.
I will be out there. And thank you so much. Next week, we'll have another episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality podcast. Please follow Christina. Please support all the things that she's doing. And we'll be back next week.